I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of More Than Kurosawa. And this week we're going to be looking at the Korean smash hit success Extreme Job by the director Lee Byeong-heon, one of the most successful directors in Korea, despite not a lot of people knowing his films. So I wanted to talk about that today. But if you're new to the series, what I do every single week is discuss a new Asian movie by a different Asian director. We've covered all different types of genres, all different types of eras and decades, all different types of countries, going back once again to another Korean movie by a Korean director that I still think represents something different, something that we haven't covered on this show, because that's the point of the show, is to showcase that there are more great filmmakers than Akira Kurosawa or Bong Joon-ho or some of these directors that you may know about, that there's so many great directors and so many great movies, and in particular with this series, mostly East Asian movies. But I think to help us understand the different kinds of movies and the different kind of amazing things that you can check out. And as always, the movies that we cover are great starting points for the director. So if you haven't heard of Lee Byeong-heon, that's definitely someone that this is a great chance to check out. A movie like Extreme Job, I think, is a great starting point to understand his kind of populist style of filmmaking. But essentially how we break up these videos is the first part, we talk about the filmmaker, why I wanted to cover him, why I thought he was an interesting filmmaker to cover, because we talk about a new one every single week. And then the second part discussing the film itself and some of the themes of the filmmaker, how they show up in the movie, what makes it interesting, why I kind of ultimately recommend it, and why you should check it out as another kind of a part of Asian cinema. And you guys have been showing a lot of support for this series, showing up, watching the videos. I always appreciate that. So if you're a new viewer, definitely subscribe to the channel, like the video. That stuff always helps the channel grow and helps support the channel. And if you're someone who's been coming back week over week, I do appreciate that. So feel free to let me know if you've seen this movie in the comments down below, or if you're excited to check it out. But without further ado, let's jump into the first part of the video, the discussion of the filmmaker, why I wanted to cover him. And I teased it at the top, but I'm really fascinated by a kind of blockbuster filmmaking within a national country. There's an industry like Bollywood or something like that has many movies every single year that are very popular. In China, they have a huge blockbuster, apparatus themselves. If you look at some of the highest grossing movies, in the past 10 years or so, a lot of them are Chinese blockbusters that people haven't really heard of, because for a lot of people's understanding of international movies, including myself, they're almost always the kind of acclaimed ones. They're always the kind of Oscar movies, the Oscar dramas. We don't really see the kind of big blockbusters. I think because we have our own blockbusters that we like. I think because sometimes their budgets are a little bit smaller, so we like, at least I know me personally, if you spend $250 million, there's nothing that looks like a movie like Dune in other countries, and just the dedication and the craft of 100 years of visual effects and learnings from that, of Hollywood being, I still think, the pinnacle of a lot of those special effects types movies. That's maybe a reason why we don't hear about them. Sometimes it's quality. Sometimes I think it's just pretension as well. You can see a movie like Godzilla -1, which is a Japanese blockbuster that becomes a sort of huge crossover success in the West, and it's a great movie, even though it is still very much a blockbuster and not a kind of serious drama from a Japanese auteur, let's say, which I like those too, and we've been covering them on this channel, but I wanted to cover a kind of blockbuster type movie. Another reason maybe why the blockbusters don't connect, and a reason why I want to cover this movie in particular, is because comedies don't really play internationally. So, a movie like Anchorman is a huge hit in North America, let's say, but, in Asia, they don't necessarily know about Anchorman or connect with the jokes or understand them in the same way that they have their own comedies. In this case, something like an Extreme Job, which was one of the biggest movies in Korean history. I think the director was saying, it had 16 million admissions. There's only about 50 million people in the country of Korea, so a large percentage of the population saw this movie. It's the second highest grossing Korean movie, or second highest grossing movie in Korea of all time. So a huge hit there. And resonant, kind of coming out of nowhere with this filmmaker that not a lot of people knew about, but still got a singular vision to himself. So I definitely just was interested in this idea of a hugely successful movie that is inspired by a lot of Hollywood comedies, but a lot of people still, haven't seen or know anything about. And then as a director himself, when I think about him, I think of populism, not in the political sense that it's often used in, but more so I would describe it in a filmmaking sense of someone who is dedicated to the audience and always wants to make sure that they entertain the audience. You see, a lot of filmmakers, you can kind of group them into two categories: an entertainer or an artist. And they're not bad or good or either or. There are different types of ways they approach things. There's, the artist. And the artist doesn't necessarily need to make a bunch of small movies. They can be someone like Denis Villeneuve, who we already mentioned, who makes this, $200 million sci-fi epic space movie. And when you talk about him in interviews, he says, I'm making the movie for one person, himself. He's just interested in making something that he likes. He wants to share something, his vision of Dune, with the world, in hopes that everyone kind of likes it, in hopes that within his specificity people resonate with it, and they do. But then you have a director like Sean Levy, who I would describe more so as an entertainer, because when you hear him talk about something like Deadpool and Wolverine, he says, I've made this movie to entertain the audience. And I would consider that more of a populist kind of a take, interested in what the audience thinks more so than what you may think is funny. If it tests bad, let's say in a test audience, even though you may have thought it was funny and put it in the movie, you may take it out because it's not resonating with the audience and people, and you wanting to kind of entertain versus share. I think that's maybe the key difference there between entertainers and artists. But I would consider Lee Byeong-heon to be a entertainer, because when you hear him talk about this movie, he sounds more like Sean Levy in that he's wanted to make this movie to make people laugh and to escape, and interested in the audience and how they feel. And you can see that throughout all of his other movies. I think in his kind of post-Extreme Job success, he made Dream for Netflix, which is kind of a rousing sports drama that is very crowd-pleasing. And then even his most recent series on Netflix, Chicken Nugget, did very well. So he's had some great success post this movie. But even just the fact of making a movie and then a streaming show for Netflix is a populist kind of approach, because he wants the most amount of people to see it. He doesn't necessarily care about awards more so than he is entertaining an audience and making them feel good. And then you see that in a lot of his movies. They're very, I would call, underdog type stories, maybe simplistic views on the world, lots of broad physical comedy, over the top kind of character types, stereotypes. There's not necessarily a naturalistic realism or drama to the stories, which isn't what you want in particular for something like a comedy. In the case of Extreme Job, you've got a great kind of a premise that is set up, and then he kind of hits it out of the park. His directing is also pretty invisible. He'll have a fast-paced edited movie, but there's not a lot of attention to the camera work and what he's doing there. His stories are big, broad, designed for mass appeal, to make you laugh, to make you feel emotional and cry. Closer to, I guess, more so like a Korean drama in a series show in that, versus maybe more, even I would say, Western films. They're a little bit more broad in the emotions and some of the kind of crazy hijinks that go on. But in the case of something like Extreme Job, which we can discuss now, works really well. So he's a filmmaker that's there, who's designing movies to please, and please he does. But speaking now, let's transition into Extreme Job. Stop beating around the bush. Discussion of the film today, if you don't know, is about a group of police detectives who take over a chicken shop right across from a known hangout of a drug dealer they're trying to take down. And then unbeknownst to them, they do such a great job running this chicken shop that it becomes this kind of viral sensation, and comedy ensues. I mentioned that this was a really successful movie, and you can see why. I think the premise is great, and they really hammer home that premise and use it to most the best ways they probably could, I think. So it's a great kind of idea of a movie, and then they execute that really well. I was worried that I wouldn't like it. I was worried that some of the jokes would go over my head, and I'm sure that there are some that I didn't get. I wasn't laughing nonstop, but a lot of the jokes are a little bit more physical and broad, and so a little bit more universal in that way too. So I think that made sense and helped me enjoy the movie. So I was still having a great time with it. I thought it was very funny and clever. Just the kind of loser aspect, the kind of bumbling idiot that has still that heart of gold that comes through at the end. I think they do some funny jokes, skewering like food influencers, or skewering kind of the difference in pay between cops and criminals, or just the kind of ridiculousness and the absurdity of the situation. They really do lean into that. I also think that the characters are really well drawn out in that they're clear archetypes. Of the team of five, there's no characters that blend together. They have these very distinct archetypes. They're styled very distinctly. They look differently. So there's, of course, the woman, who's kind of a little bit more hard-nosed and hard-headed and a little bit more, tough around the edges. You have the old guy who's a little bit more of a leader, but he's been, let down, hasn't been promoted past captain to lieutenant. And then you have the kind of hothead kind of a gambling guy. And then you have the quiet one. And then you have the newbie kind of intern guy. And they're all these well-defined character archetypes so that they're able to bring something different to the movie, and they don't feel like they're stealing from each other. They don't feel like they're competing for each other's scenes. It reminds me of a movie like Anchorman in that way, in that there's these very distinctive kind of group of guys that complement each other very well and have their own kind of own comedy style, and it's okay because you kind of like every flavor. You just want to try every different one, and different scenes allow different actors to really excel in that way. So as a result, you get a really engaging premise with a bunch of fun characters that you want to hang out with some really clever jokes and some heartfelt kind of emotion of losers, coming back and getting a win for once, and getting their time to shine, and a movie that's really indebted to Hollywood, yet still not a lot of people in Hollywood have seen. Really interesting kind of maybe example of a very popular modern Korean comedy movie. I didn't want to make the series every single week these kind of sophisticated, highbrow, pretentious types of movies. We want to showcase that there's, they have their own blockbusters in Asia too, and they're successful, and they can also be really great and can be designed for, the idea of entertainment. So while I didn't get maybe all the jokes, while there is still going to be some cultural differences that I'll never love this movie as much as I love an Anchorman, let's say, but I was very impressed at kind of the broad humor, the over-the-top silliness, absurdity of the situation, and ultimately had a really fun, entertaining time. So if you're interested in something like that, I would recommend Extreme Job as another example that when it comes to Asian cinema, there is more than Kurosawa. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you let me know if you've seen this movie in the comments down below. It's on Netflix in a lot of countries, so you can check it out there. You can also check out maybe one of his other movies, Dream, for example, or his series, Chicken Nugget. Lots of kind of interesting, fun, absurdist, over-the-top filmmaking that he is interested in. That if you like Extreme Job, I think you'll like more of his stuff too. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.